Have you ever thought about how you would act in a war? Would you lose faith in humanity? Would you remain optimistic? Would you seek adventure? Would you enjoy the moment, or would you prefer not to get involved? Hello, how are you? My name is José Rey. I'm a film critic for Flixion, and thank you very much for playing this video where we will talk about Civil War, the new movie from Alex Garland and A24, which has become the best premiere from the famous producer and at the same time promises to be one of the most talked about movies of this year. The Englishman Alex Garland, 53 years old, is the screenwriter of movies like The Beach, 28 Days Later, and Sunshine. He then became the director of his own works, which are Ex Machina, Annihilation, Men, and now Civil War. What is Civil War about? The movie is set in a near future where the United States is engulfed in a civil war. There, a small group of journalists and war photographers embark on a road trip straight to Washington, D.C., with the goal of interviewing the President of the United States. Of course, you might wonder why there is a civil war. What happened? The reality is that it is not specifically known. The information the movie gives the audience is that the President of the United States has a fascist speech and attitude, to the extent that he is already on his third term, which is unconstitutional. Beyond that, not much is known, and it seems of little importance to the director since the movie does not focus on the Civil War per se, but on a group of journalists. I warn you that this is a movie about which there is much to talk about, so I warn you that there will be many spoilers and twists. You are warned. This team is headed by Lee, played by Kirsten Dunst, an already experienced photojournalist from Reuters. Joel, Wagner Moura, a print journalist who seeks to interview the president. Sammy, played by McKinley Henderson, an experienced journalist and editor friend who decides to accompany them, and the young Jessie, Cailee Spaeny, who is just starting her career and basically tags along on the trip. This group is very good and central to the story, as Garland exemplifies life itself with them. While Lee reflects despair for humanity, Sammy is the exact opposite. He is a warm being who fights precisely for humanity and his ideals. That is why, and here we enter spoiler territory, his death is quite devastating. Sammy gives his life helping others. Only a hero and someone who believes in humanity can do that. But, on the other hand, we must also remember there is a scene where Jessie asks Lee, "If I were on the brink of death, what would you do? Would you help me or take a picture?" To which Lee responds, "What do you think?" implying that she would take the photo. Later, Lee talks about how the job of photojournalists is not to intervene but just to show. Then, when she sees Sammy intervene, and that's why he dies, it greatly affects Lee and makes her rethink her initial response. For that reason, that ending, where the circle of life repeats with Lee and Jessie. Lee decides to intervene, and she also does not have a good ending. Just for that, the movie is incredible. It's worth delving into the relationship between Lee and Jessie. There is the idea of the young brave woman who is trained, almost reluctantly, by the experienced heroine. Jessie sees Lee as a heroine and wants to be like her, while Lee is afraid that Jessie will end up becoming like her. That is why their characters are very tangible and close. Returning to the question, if I were on the brink of death, what would you do? As we discussed, not only does Lee change her answers because she intervenes, but Jessie also changes her answer, because now she is the one taking the photo. At that moment, Jessie becomes a true photojournalist, almost going from Padawan to Jedi. Obviously, this needs to be taken with a grain of salt. We are talking about what happens in this story, in this fiction. In real life, I am not a photojournalist, but I understand that the job of a journalist is to serve the story and not personal interests. But it's not that photojournalists are unscrupulous people who seek to take photos of dead colleagues. No, what prevails here is the relationship between Lee and Jessie. Now, Jesse has become Lee, and in the future, Jesse will surely pass the torch to another person. In the future, Jesse will ask that same question to another young girl. Thus, it is the circle of life that the film portrays. Let's also talk about Joel, who is perhaps the character who has the least impact on the plot, but at the same time is the most human. While adventure, optimism, and despair manage the lives of the others, Joel is enjoying the moment. He's a bit cheeky, he's noisy, he can't control his emotions, he cries like a baby, but when he needs to be serious, he is. Wagner Moura is very good in that role, being one of the Latinos in Hollywood who should be on par with the fame of Pedro Pascal or Oscar Isaac. I hope he gets many more roles. Now let's talk about the politics, or the political message, within the film. Several things happen here. Yes, it's true that the film does not really explain why what is happening beyond the fact that the President of the United States is a fascist. This has made many people believe that the film does not have a political stance, which is not true at all. First, Garland, whether he wants to or not, is saying two things. First, war is always bad, which is obvious. Second, fascism is bad, which is also obvious. So it's not that the film does not take a political stance, it is being positioned against totalitarianism. It may seem obvious, but with the things that are happening in the world at this precise moment, and with the great ideological and political division that exists in the United States, it is more than logical to do so. Totalitarianism is increasingly present in our lives. It always has been. The issue is that now there is a real fear that not even democracy itself will be saved from it. Civil war is saying, as a warning, that not even the institutional foundations of a country like the United States will be saved from totalitarianism if we continue like this. So there is a political positioning and a message. No matter the interests of the fascist, he is a fascist, period. The issue is that the audience is used to movies showing and explaining everything, so many people want a pamphlet or a political responsibility expressed, or that someone come out and directly say Trump is bad and that's it. The worst part is that the film does show that Trump is not the desired path. The great scene with Jesse Plemons' character when he asks the journalists, "What kind of American are you?" is a total reference to Trump's speech. Similarly, beyond Trump, it is a phrase that reflects the great division that exists in the United States. Remember, there are no apolitical people, there are only fools. So, there are no works that are not political. The best part is that Garland has the luxury of doing the impossible. I believe it is more likely that there will be a serious civil war in the United States than that Texas and California will join together to fight. That's crazy, but there the movie is also being explained. Fascism is so bad that even Texas and California, the states that are most rivals and different from the United States, will end up joining to fight.
Citizens of America, the so-called Western forces of Texas and California have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Is all this a warning for the United States? It can be taken as such. This is actually happening in many parts. It is not something new. Even a great phrase from Lee in the movie is, "Every time I went to war to take photos, I thought I was warning my country about what we should never do, and here we are." Is the United States far from reaching that? Let's hope so, but don't forget what happened on January 6th during the assault on the Capitol. In conclusion, I must say that I loved Civil War. I'm not a big fan of Garland's cinema, to be honest, but this one seemed very good, very well-rounded. It's one of those films that if I ever got to make one, I could die in peace. It takes a small group of 4 people, and that is enough to talk about everything. It ends up being one of the films that talks about the now more effectively than I've seen in a long time. Is it uncomfortable? For some, it may be visually uncomfortable because there are quite terrifying scenes. But really, it's uncomfortable because of the idea that if a powerful country with the institutions it has, like the United States, can fall into a civil war, what's left for the rest? It's also worth mentioning that I love the character of Kirsten Dunst. In mainstream cinema, there aren't many roles like this for women, and there should be more. it's an obvious thing I'm saying, but indeed there aren't. On the other hand, the sound work is very good in the movie. It stands out a lot in the entire final sequence, which is also very good. I think Civil War will be one of my favorite movies of this year, and one that I want to watch several times. This was my review of Civil War. Thank you very much for staying until this part of the video. I hope you liked it. If you can, it would help us a lot if you give us a like and subscribe to the channel.